ICE doesn't just knock on doors anymore. It logs into databases. Before you hit play on this video, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because what you're about to learn is going to completely change how you think about privacy, government power, and surveillance in America. This isn't about immigration politics. This is about systems. This is about money. This is about how one agency quietly became the most powerful surveillance operation in the country. And most Americans have no idea it even happened. Let me paint you a picture right now. ICE has access to hundreds of millions of records. Your driver's license photo, your address from the DMV, your license plate scans from that highway you drove on last week, your utility bills, your phone location data, your Medicaid records if you have them, your passport information, your social security files, your IRS tax data, all of it in one place, searchable, accessible, without a warrant in many cases. You might be thinking this is about catching dangerous criminals, right? That's what they want you to think. But here's what nobody tells you. The infrastructure ICE has built doesn't just track immigrants. It tracks everyone, every single person whose information lives in a government database, which is basically everyone. And the craziest part, this all happened quietly. No big announcement, no national conversation, just a slow, methodical expansion of surveillance power that accelerated so fast in the last few years that even state governors didn't realize what was happening until 2025. Let me tell you how we got here. ICE was created in 2003, fresh off the fear of September 11th. The Department of Homeland Security was born, and ICE was one of its children. Back then, the agency had a pretty straightforward mission: immigration enforcement, track down people who overstayed visas, deport people who entered illegally, handle customs and border issues. Simple enough. The budget was around $6 billion. Not small, but not huge either. But something changed, slowly at first. Then all at once, ICE started getting access to more databases, more technology, more money. And here's the key part that most people miss. Every time there was a crisis, whether it was terrorism fears, border surges, or political pressure to crack down on immigration, ICE got more power, more tools, more access. The pattern is clear when you see it. Crisis creates fear. Fear creates political pressure. Political pressure creates funding. Funding creates infrastructure. And infrastructure is permanent. By 2025, ICE's budget exploded to $85 billion. Read that again. $85 billion. That's more than the entire Justice Department, including the FBI. ICE is now the highest funded law enforcement agency in America. How did that happen? The One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July 2025 gave ICE a $75 billion supplement on top of its regular $10 billion annual budget. That's essentially tripling their funding overnight. To put that in perspective, Poland spent less on its entire military last year than ICE has to spend right now. You're probably wondering what they're spending all that money on. $45 billion is going toward detention centers, new facilities to hold over 100,000 people at a time. That's more than the entire federal prison system. Another $30 billion is going toward enforcement and deportation operations, hiring agents, buying equipment. And here's where it gets interesting: buying surveillance. Technology. I spent at least $45 million in 2024 and 2025 alone building what privacy advocates are calling a surveillance state. Not my words, their words. And when you look at what I bought with that money, it's hard to argue. Let me break down the shopping list. $30 million went to a company called Planner Technologies to build something called Immigrationos. Planner is a data company founded by Peter Thiel, the billionaire tech investor. You might know him from Facebook's early days or his connections to political circles. Planner specializes in taking messy, massive amounts of data and turning it into actionable intelligence. They started working with the CIA in 2005, then the military, then ICE. What Planner does for ICE is essentially create a master dashboard. Imagine every government database you can think of: passport records, social security files, IRS tax data, state driver's license databases, license plate reader data, border crossing records, facial recognition databases, immigration histories, criminal records, private databases that ICE purchases from data brokers. Now imagine all of that information flowing into one system where an ICE agent can type in a name or an address and instantly see everything about a person, every place they've lived, every car they've registered, every time their license plate was scanned by a camera, every time they crossed a border, their family relationships, their employment history, their biometric data, all of it, in seconds. That's what Planner built. And Immigration O's is just the latest version. Planner has been working with ICE since 2013, providing systems like Falcon and investigative case management. But Immigration O's takes it to another level. According to the contract documents, this system is designed to streamline the identification and apprehension of people prioritized for removal. It provides near real-time visibility on people self-deporting, and it uses artificial intelligence to detect patterns, flag individuals who meet certain criteria, and generate confidence scores on where someone currently lives. Let me repeat that, confidence scores. The system uses AI to guess where you are right now based on all the data it has access to. 90% confident you're at this address, 70% confident you're at work. The technology is making predictions about human behavior and location, and those predictions are driving enforcement actions, arrest, detentions, deportations. And here's the part that should terrify you. Planner systems don't just use government data. They also pull from private databases, companies that sell your information, data brokers. ICE pays for access to commercial databases that track where you live, where you work, what car you drive, who your family members are. One of these databases is called Clear. It's run by a company called Thomson Reuters. ICE agents use Clear constantly. There are emails from ICE agents to state DMV employees saying things like, "We have the Clear results, but need to verify if this person has a driver's license in your state." Clear has information on hundreds of millions of Americans, and ICE has a subscription. But wait, it gets worse. ICE also bought access to facial recognition technology. $9 million went to a company called Clearview AI. You might have heard of them. Clearview scraped billions of photos from social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere. They built a database of over 3 billion faces, and they sell access to law enforcement. ICE can upload a photo of someone, and Clearview will search through billions of images to find matches, where that person has been, what accounts they have, who they're connected to. ICE also uses something called Mobile Fortify. This is a facial recognition app that works on agents' phones. They can point their phone at someone's face in public, scan it, and the system instantly searches through 200 million driver's license photos to identify the person. No consent needed, no warrant needed, just point and scan. The system reportedly connects to NLETS, which is the network that links state DMV databases. So an ICE agent can scan your face on the street and within seconds know your name, address, date of birth, and whether you have any flags in the system. Think about that for a second. An ICE agent walking down the street has the ability to identify almost anyone they see just by looking at them through a phone. That's not science fiction. That's happening right now. And it's not just for finding dangerous criminals. The system is being used for visa overstays, people who forgot to leave the country on time, people with no criminal record. The infrastructure is built for mass surveillance, and the criteria for who gets targeted keeps expanding. Now you might be thinking, okay, but I'm a US citizen. I'm not worried about ICE. This doesn't affect me. Wrong. Dead wrong. Because here's what nobody is telling you. ICE's surveillance dragnet doesn't care about citizenship status. The database's ICE accesses include everyone. When ICE searches driver's license records, it sees citizens and non-citizens. When license plate readers scan your car, the system doesn't check if you're American first. When Clearview searches for a face, it searches everyone's social media. The surveillance infrastructure is universal. It's not targeted. It's dragnet. And that means if you have ever been near someone ICE is looking for, your data is getting pulled to. Your family members, your co-workers, your roommates, your friends, anyone ICE thinks might have. Information about a target becomes part of the surveillance web. There are documented cases of ICE using workplace raids where they detain not just the target, but anyone nearby. And all of those people's information goes into the system. Photos, biometrics, addresses. It all gets stored for years. ICE has already conducted facial recognition searches on at least 83 million drivers. License photos. That's 1 in 3 adults in America. The agency has requested face recognition. Scans from DMVs in at least 14 states since 2015. Some of those states have since banned the practice, but the damage is done. The data is already in the system. And once it's in, it stays in. Here's where the story gets even more twisted. Most of its data sharing happens without states even realizing it. There's a system called NLETS, the International Justice and Public Safety Network. It's a nonprofit organization managed by state police agencies, and it connects federal, state, and local law enforcement to share data. Think of it like a massive digital highway where information flows between agencies, DMV records, vehicle registrations, driver's license photos, criminal records, all accessible through queries. ICE has access to NLETs. All 50 states and DC have given ICE authorization codes to query the system. And here's the kicker. When ICE makes a query through NLETs, the system doesn't show why the information is being requested. So even if the state is law is sane, DMV data can't be shared with ICE for immigration enforcement purposes. Those laws don't apply to NLETs because NLETs doesn't disclose the purpose of the request. It's a loophole, a massive, gaping loophole. In the year leading up to October 2025, ICE made almost 300,000 queries through NLETs for DMV data. Another 600,000 queries came from Homeland Security investigations, another DHS component. That's nearly 900,000 requests for state driver's license and vehicle data in 1 year. And most state officials didn't even know what was happening. In November 2025, 40 Democratic members of Congress sent letters to 19 governors warning them about this. Data sharing, the letters said, it is now abundantly clear that a major reason that so few states have locked down the data they share through NLETs is because of an information gap, because of the technical complexity of NLET system. Few state government officials understand how their state is sharing their residents' data with federal and out-of-state agencies. As of early 2026, only 5 states have blocked ICE access to their DMV databases through NLETs: Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Washington. That's it, 5 states out of 50. Everyone else is still sharing data, many without realizing the full extent of it. And even in states that have tried to protect residents' information, there are workarounds. ICE can contact DMV employees directly and request information. ICE can buy data from private brokers, who get it from DMVs. ICE can access other federal databases that states feed information into. The surveillance web is so interconnected, so sprawling, so complex that trying to opt out of it is nearly impossible. Even if you don't have a driver's license, ICE can access your passport records, your social security records, your IRS tax data, your Medicaid information if you receive benefits. In December 2025, it was revealed that ICE is using a planner tool called Elite, enhanced leads identification and targeting for enforcement, that pulls addresses from the Department of Health and Human Services, which includes Medicaid databases. The system populates a map with potential deportation targets based on Medicaid records and provides confidence scores on current addresses. Think about what that means. If you or someone in your household receives Medicaid, that information is potentially being used to map enforcement targets. And this isn't just about immigration status. The system is designed to find clusters of people. Locations where lots of people ICE might detain could be based. That's mass surveillance at scale. You're probably starting to see the pattern here. Every database is connected. Every piece of information flows somewhere. And ICE has built a system to access almost all of it. The question isn't whether you're in the database. You're. The question is what happens when someone decides you're worth looking at. Here's what most people don't understand about surveillance. It's not about watching you all the time. It's about having the ability to reconstruct your entire life whenever they want to. Let me explain how this actually works on the ground. An ICE agent in the field office gets a name. Maybe it's someone who overstayed a visa. Maybe it's someone flagged by the new AI system for having alleged gang affiliations. Could be anything. The agent opens up the planner system, types in the name, and within seconds, everything comes up. Last known address from DMV records, current address from utility bills data, purchase from brokers, vehicle registrations, license plate scans showing where the car has been, spotted, family members pulled from immigration databases and public records, employment history from IRS filings, border crossing records showing every time this person entered or left the country, social media profiles matched through facial recognition, phone numbers, email addresses, the whole picture. Now the agent opens Falcon Mobile, another planner app designed for field operations. This app shows real-time GPS locations of other ICE agents using Blue Force mapping, so teams can coordinate. It also allows agents to query databases while they're in the field. They can search the Treasury Enforcement Communication System, which Customs and Border Protection uses at borders. They can search the Enforcement Integrated Database, which has immigration records. They can search the seized assets in Case Tracking System, which is trade data, all from a phone while sitting in a car outside someone's house. And if the agent needs more certainty about whether they have the right person, they can use the facial recognition app, scan someone's face, compare it to the DMV database. Instant confirmation. The entire investigative process that used to take days or weeks now takes minutes. That's what Planner means when they talk about efficiency. They're not wrong. The system is incredibly efficient. That's exactly what makes it so dangerous, because here's the thing nobody talks about. These systems pull data regardless of accuracy. If there's an error in a database, that error gets replicated across every system that uses it. If someone shares your address, your information gets pulled. If your license plate happens to be scanned near a location ICE is monitoring, you're in the system. If facial recognition makes a mistake, which it does especially with people of color, you could be flagged for something you didn't do. And there's no easy way to correct it, because you didn't even know you ran the system. There's another layer to this that's even more insidious. ICE doesn't just use federal databases. They've created partnerships with state and local law enforcement that effectively deputize local cops to do immigration enforcement. Through programs like 287G, local police agencies can enter agreements with ICE to perform immigration functions. And guess what those local cops get access to? The same databases, the same facial recognition tools, the same surveillance infrastructure. In November 2025, ICE gave local police agencies access to Mobile Identify, a version of the facial recognition app. Cops in jurisdictions across the country can now scan faces and run them through ICE systems. This is where it gets wild. Some states, like Illinois, have laws that ban their police from using certain facial recognition technology, but ICE isn't bound by state laws, so ICE provides the technology to local cops, who use it anyway because it's technically an ICE tool, not a state tool. It's a workaround, a loophole, and it's happening everywhere. The same thing is happening with license plate readers. ICE has contracts with a company called Flock Safety. Flock operates a massive network of automated license plate readers. 20 billion license plate scans per month across 5,000 agencies. That's not a typo. 20 billion scans every month. The cameras are everywhere. On highways, on city streets, in parking lots, in neighborhoods. And they're all feeding data into a centralized system that ICE can access. When your car drives past one of these cameras, the system logs the plate number, the time, the location, and the direction of travel. Do that enough times, and the system can map your entire routine. Where you live, where you work, where you shop, who you visit. And Flock doesn't just scan plates. The newer cameras also capture vehicle make, model, and color. They use AI to identify unique features, a dent, a bumper sticker, custom wheels, anything that makes your car identifiable. The goal is to track vehicles even if the plates are obscured. Some states have started pushing back. In 2025, multiple city councils blocked Flock contracts after activists raised concerns. Austin, Texas, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Eugene, Oregon. But for every city that says no, dozens of others say yes, because the federal government is offering money. ICE is using its massive new budget to fund local surveillance purchases. They're buying the technology and giving it to local agencies in exchange for access to the data. This is how surveillance infrastructure spreads, not through some dystopian decree from Washington, through grants, through partnerships, through making it easy and financially beneficial for local agencies to adopt the technology. And once it's in place, it never leaves. Even if political winds change, even if a new administration takes over, the infrastructure stays. The databases keep growing. The cameras keep recording. The facial recognition keeps scanning. Let me give you another example of how deep this goes. ICE also bought spyware. Yes, spyware. In August 2025, ICE revived a contract with an Israeli company called Paragon. Paragon makes something called graphite. It's a zero-click spyware that can infect your phone without you doing anything. You don't have to click a link. You don't have to download an attachment. The spyware just gets installed remotely through vulnerabilities in your phone's operating system. Once it's on your device, Paragon can read everything. Your encrypted messages, Signal, WhatsApp, all of it, your photos, your location history, your contacts, everything. And because it's zero-click, you'll never know it's there. ICE paused this program in 2024 after backlash from civil liberties groups, but in 2025, they brought it back. The contract amount wasn't disclosed, which is interesting. Usually federal contracts are public, record, but when it comes to surveillance technology, especially spyware, the government often classifies the details for national security reasons. What we do know is that ICE has the capability to remotely access phones, read encrypted communications, and track people through their devices, and the Fourth Amendment protections that are supposed to prevent this kind of thing. They're being stretched to the breaking point. Here's the legal trick. ICE argues that immigration enforcement is a civil matter, not a criminal one. So some of the warrant requirements that apply to criminal investigations don't apply to immigration. That's the justification, of course, that falls apart when you realize that ICE is using criminal, investigative techniques, spyware, wiretaps, surveillance, but the legal framework hasn't caught up with the technology. So ICE operates in this gray zone where they have access to tools that would require warrants in a criminal context, but they're using them in a civil immigration context where the rules are murkier. Now let's talk about what happens to your phone if ICE physically gets their hands on it. Maybe you're detained at a border crossing. Maybe you're arrested in a workplace raid. Maybe you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. ICE has contracts with two companies that specialize in breaking into phones, Celebrite and Magnet Forensics. $11 million to Celebrite, $3 million to Magnet. These companies make tools that can unlock almost any phone, iPhones, Androids, doesn't matter. Once the phone is unlocked, the tools extract everything: apps, location history, photos, notes, call records, text messages, even encrypted messages from Signal and WhatsApp. Think about everything on your phone right now. Every private conversation, every photo, every search history, every app you've used, every website you've visited, your banking apps, your medical apps, your personal notes, all of that can be copied and stored in ICE databases if they get physical access to your device. And once it's in their system, it's there forever. They can search it, cross-reference it, use it to find other people. Your contacts become targets. Your location history gets mapped. Your messages get read. And here's the thing that should make your blood run cold. This technology isn't just being used on people ICE arrests. It's being used on anyone nearby. There are documented cases of ICE conducting workplace raids where they detain everyone present, not just the target. They check IDs, they take photos, they confiscate phones. Even if you're a US citizen, even if you've done nothing wrong, if you happen to be at a location, when ICE shows up, you're getting caught in the dragnet. Your information is getting collected. Your biometrics are getting stored. Mobile Fortify, the facial recognition app, has a feature that's particularly dystopian, according to the contract documents. Individuals cannot decline to be photographed. Read that again. You cannot decline. If an ICE agent points their phone at your face, you don't have the legal right to refuse. They take the photo. The system scans your face. Your biometric data goes into the database, and it stays there for 15 years. That's the retention period. 15 years. Even if you were never arrested, even if you were never charged with anything, even if you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, your face is in the system for 15 years. This is what mission creep looks like. The technology is built for one purpose: finding and removing dangerous criminals, but the application keeps expanding. Visa overstays. Civil violations, activists at protest, people who happen to be related to someone ICE is looking for. The criteria keeps broadening because once you have the infrastructure, once you have the capability, it's incredibly tempting to use it, and there's very little oversight stopping it. Let's talk about oversight for a second, or the lack of it. ICE operates under the Department of Homeland Security. DHS has an Office of Inspector General. That's supposed to provide independent oversight, but that office has been criticized for years for being ineffective. The current Inspector General was appointed in the first term of the previous administration, and civil liberties groups have been calling for reforms for years because the oversight has been, let's just say, not great. There's also supposed to be oversight from Congress, but here's the problem. The same budget bill that gave ICE $85 billion also gutted the Government Accountability Office, the investigative arm of Congress. The GAO was facing major layoffs. The very agency that is supposed to audit federal spending and investigate potential abuses is being defunded at the same time. ICE is getting the biggest budget increase in its history. That's not a coincidence. That's strategy. So, how did we get here? How did one agency go from a $10 billion immigration enforcement operation to an $85 billion surveillance empire in the span of 2 decades? The answer is actually pretty simple. Follow the money. Follow the fear. Follow the incentives. Let's start with the money. ICE's budget in 2003 was around $6 billion. By 2015, it had barely grown, around $5.9 billion. Then border encounters spiked in 2019. Suddenly, there was a crisis narrative. Caravans, invasions, emergency declarations. And when there's a crisis, Congress opens the checkbook. ICE's budget started climbing: $6 billion, $7 billion, $8 billion. By 2020, it was hovering around $10 billion and stayed there for years. But then a new administration came in with a Republican Congress, willing to give them whatever they wanted. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July 2025 wasn't just about immigration. It was a massive reconciliation bill that reshaped federal spending priorities. And buried in that bill was $170 billion for immigration and border enforcement over 4 years. $75 billion of that went directly to ICE, $45 billion for detention, $30 billion for enforcement. Another $10 billion went to a DHS slush fund that can be used for pretty much anything related to Homeland Security, which likely means more money for ICE. The budget bill tripled ICE's annual funding overnight. And here's what's wild. At the same time ICE was getting this historic windfall, the bill was cutting programs that millions of Americans rely on. Medicaid cuts, SNAP cuts. The deficit is projected to increase by $3.4 trillion over 10 years because of this bill. Half of that increase is from the immigration and border enforcement spending. The government decided that deporting people and building surveillance infrastructure is a higher priority than healthcare and food assistance. That's a choice, a deliberate choice about what this country values. But it's not just about the budget number. It's about what the money buys. And what it buys is contractors, private companies that profit from ICE operations. Let's start with Planner. As of September 2024, ICE has awarded Planner contracts worth over $157 million. That's just the disclosed contracts. There are likely more that aren't public. Planner's entire business model is building surveillance systems for governments. They work with the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and ICE. In 2025, Planner's stock price exploded. The company is now valued at over $400 billion. That makes it one of the most valuable companies on Earth. And a significant chunk of that value comes from government contracts. Planner's CEO, Alex Karp, is very open about what his company does. He said their product is used in military operations. He wasn't joking. Planner software is used by the military for targeting operations. It's used by ICE to find people for deportation. The same AI targeting systems used by militaries are adapted for law enforcement. It's a feedback loop, where tech becomes police tech. And Planner isn't the only company profiting. Clearview AI, the facial recognition company, has made millions from ICE contracts. Flock Safety, the license plate reader company, is expanding rapidly with government funding. Cellebrite and Magnet Forensics are selling phone cracking tools to agencies across the country. There's an entire industry built around surveillance. And that industry has lobbyists. They have campaign contributions. They have influence. Here's how the cycle works. A crisis happens. The media amplifies fear. Politicians respond by promising to get tough. Congress allocates money. That money goes to contractors. Contractors build infrastructure. The infrastructure enables more enforcement. More enforcement creates more data. More data requires more infrastructure to analyze. More infrastructure means more contracts. And the cycle continues. At each stage, private companies are making money, and those companies have a vested interest in making sure the cycle never stops. Let's talk about private prisons for a second because that's a huge part of this. $45 billion in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is allocated for ICE detention expansion. The goal is to hold over 100,000 people at a time. That's more detention capacity than the entire federal prison system. And who runs these detention centers? Private companies. Kurasevich and GEO Group are the two largest. Almost 90% of people in ICE custody are held in for-profit facilities. These companies make money per detainee per day. The more people detained, the longer they're detained, the more profit these companies make. And guess what? Both Kurasevich and GEO Group have hired former high-level ICE officials to work for them. It's the revolving door in action. ICE officials leave the agency and go work for the companies they used to contract with. Those companies then use their insider knowledge to win more contracts. It's not corruption in the legal sense because it's all technically allowed, but it's corruption in a moral sense. The incentives are completely misaligned with the public interest. Before the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was even signed in July 2025, ICE had already solicited contracts from private firms for expedited detention construction. They set up a fast-track procurement process. No time for oversight. No time for competitive bidding in many cases. Just get it done fast. And when you move that quickly with that much money, corners get cut, oversight gets diminished, accountability disappears. And it's not just detention. ICE is outsourcing more and more of its operations to contractors. The surveillance tech, the data analysis, the transportation of detainees, the medical care and facilities, even some of the enforcement actions involve contracted personnel. What you're watching is the creation of what some groups are calling a deportation industrial complex, an entire economy built around finding, detaining, and removing people. And once that economy exists, once those jobs and profits are tied to it, it becomes politically very difficult to dismantle. Think about it. Let's say a new administration comes into power and wants to scale back ICE operations. They immediately face pushback from contractors who would lose money, from communities where detention centers provide jobs, from politicians whose districts benefit from ICE spending, from lobbyists representing the surveillance and detention industries. The infrastructure creates its own political protection. It's self-sustaining, and that's by design. Now let's talk about the technology companies for a minute. Companies like Planner, Clearview, Flock, they all position themselves as neutral. They're just providing tools. They're not making policy decisions. They're not choosing who gets targeted. That's true on one level, but on another level, it's nonsense. Because the design of a system shapes the outcomes. When you build an AI system that generates confidence scores on where someone lives, you're making a design choice that prioritizes efficiency over accuracy. When you build a facial recognition system that can't be declined, you're making a choice about consent. When you build a database that links immigration records to Medicaid data, you're making a choice about who gets surveilled. There's a concept in technology ethics called dual use. A tool built for one purpose can be used for another. Nuclear technology can power cities or destroy them. Encryption can protect dissidents or enable criminals. Surveillance systems can catch terrorists or oppress populations. The technology itself is neutral. It's the application that matters. But here's the problem. Once the tool exists, you can't control how it's used. So what does all of this mean? Where does it end? And more importantly, what can anyone actually do about it? Let's start with where this is heading. If the current trajectory continues, and there's no reason to think it won't, ICE is going to become the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. It already has the most funding. It already has the most expansive surveillance capabilities, and it's still growing. The $85 billion budget is for 2025. There's no indication spending will decrease in future years. In fact, it's more likely to increase, because once you normalize a certain level of spending, that becomes the new baseline. And as ICE's capabilities expand, so will its mission. That's inevitable. Right now the focus is immigration, but ICE also handles customs enforcement, trade violations, intellectual property theft, money laundering, human trafficking, drug trafficking. Each of those areas could justify expanded surveillance. Each could be used as a reason to access more databases, deploy more technology, conduct more operations. And once the infrastructure exists, the temptation to use it for other purposes becomes overwhelming. Think about what that means. Right now, ICE is focused on immigration enforcement. But what if the mission changes? What if a future administration decides to use the same infrastructure for something else? Political surveillance, monitoring activists, tracking protesters, finding whistleblowers. The tools don't care. They're just tools. They do what they're told. And once you've normalized mass surveillance for one purpose, it becomes much easier to justify it for another. Let's talk about what could go wrong. And I don't mean hypothetically. I mean what is already going wrong right now. In early 2026, there have been reports of ICE raids that resulted in the detention of U.S. citizens. One case in New Jersey involved a man who was detained for 3 days before ICE realized he was American. Another case in Texas involved a veteran who was held for over a week. These aren't isolated incidents. They raise symptoms of a system moving fast with too little oversight and too much reliance on imperfect technology. When you're conducting mass operations, mistakes are inevitable. But when those mistakes involve depriving people of their liberty, when they involve separating families, when they involve potentially deporting people to countries they're not from, the stakes are catastrophic. And the current system has almost no safeguards to prevent those mistakes. An ICE agent can detain someone based on an AI confidence score and a database query. No warrant needed in many cases. No judicial oversight before the detention happens. Due process comes later, if at all. And here's another uncomfortable reality. The expanded enforcement is creating a climate of fear in immigrant communities. People are afraid to go to work, afraid to send their kids to school, afraid to seek medical care, afraid to report crimes. That fear has consequences beyond immigration. When entire communities are afraid to interact with any government institution, public health suffers, public safety suffers. Kids miss school, sick people don't see doctors, crimes go unreported. So what can be done? That's the question everyone wants answered. And the honest answer is that there's no easy solution. The infrastructure is already built. The contracts are already signed. The technology is already deployed. Undoing all of that would require a massive political effort. It would require Congress to cut funding, which means going up against the contractors and lobbyists who benefit from that funding. It would require executive action to change enforcement priorities. It would require judicial intervention to establish stronger Fourth Amendment protections for database searches and facial recognition. All of that is possible, but it's not probable in the short term. So what can individuals do? First, awareness. Understanding that this infrastructure exists, understanding how it works, understanding that it affects everyone, not just immigrants. That awareness is the first step toward political pressure. Second, support organizations that are fighting this, the ACLU, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, immigrant rights groups. These organizations are filing lawsuits, lobbying Congress, and documenting abuses. They need funding and public support. Third, engage locally. Push your city council to ban facial recognition. Push your state legislature to block DMV data sharing with ICE. Push your representatives in Congress to demand oversight and cut funding. Those actions feel small. They feel insufficient against an $85 billion surveillance apparatus. But political change often happens slowly. It happens through accumulation of small victories. One city banning facial recognition. One state blocking data sharing. One court case establishing a precedent over time. Those small victories add up. They shift the political landscape. They create momentum. The alternative is to do nothing, to accept that surveillance is the new normal, to accept that privacy is a thing of the past, to accept that the government will continue expanding its power unchecked. And maybe that's where we're headed. Maybe the surveillance state is inevitable. Maybe resistance is futile, but I don't believe that. I think people still have power. I think public pressure still matters. I think the system can still be changed, but it requires awareness. It requires effort, and it requires people to care. Because here's the final truth. The surveillance infrastructure being built right now will outlast the current administration, will outlast the current political moment. It will be here for decades, and future generations are going to look back and ask, how did this happen? How did America build a surveillance state? How did one agency get access to hundreds of millions of records? How did facial recognition become normalized? How did mass deportations become acceptable? And the answer is going to be simple. It happened because not enough people paid attention. It happened because the infrastructure was built incrementally. It happened because fear was used to justify power. And it happened because the incentives were all wrong. That's the story of ICE. That's the story of surveillance in America. And that's the story you need to understand. Because it's not over. It's still happening. Every day, more data is being collected. Every day, more surveillance is being deployed. Every day. The infrastructure grows, and every day that people don't pay attention, it becomes harder to stop. So pay attention, ask questions, demand answers, because this is your country. This is your privacy. These are your rights. And if you don't fight for them, no one else will. Before you go, I need to know what you think. Drop a comment and tell me. Are you concerned about ICE's surveillance capabilities? Or do you think this is necessary for security? I want to hear both sides. I want real discussion. Because this isn't a simple issue. There are legitimate arguments on both sides, but we can't have that discussion if people don't even know what's happening. So share this video, get the word out, and if you found this valuable, hit that like button and subscribe because I'm going to keep investigating these systems. I'm going to keep following the money. I'm going to keep asking the questions that no one else is asking. This is just the beginning.